Let's say hello to someone that I've known for a long time. I've done his show many times over the years. You see him every week with Tyson Rouch on the Let's Talk Jets YouTube channel. It's our guy Bubz from Bubz on Sports joining us now to talk some Jets. Mr. Bubz, how we feeling?
Jake, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me on. Hopefully everybody in the chat's doing well. Football's back. Pads are on. We got the Kenny Pickett, Carson Beck standalone primetime game tonight, so football's in the air. I'm fired up and looking forward to diving into some Jets today.
You know, it came up on my time hop the other day, the anniversary of the Jets playing in the Hall of Fame game, the year Revis and Klecko were going into the Hall of Fame, and all the hoopla surrounding Aaron Rodgers and Hard Knocks being there, and just looking at where we're at now, where only it kind of feels like the diehards of diehards are locked into everything going on at camp. It was a totally different universe 3 years ago surrounding this football team.
Yeah, it's crazy. The summer of 2023, the Hard Knocks, Ed Sheeran, the Shivers song that was going on over Hard Knocks. I saw you tweet that the other day. It's the only the Jets can make you get PTSD from a song like that, where you can't listen to it anymore because it takes you back to that summer and ultimately what ensued on that Monday night game, September 11th. So it was, crazy with Hard Knocks, the summer training camp hype. We saw it like no other, and that was the game, right? Throw it up to Malik. The Browns game in the Hall of Fame weekend. I know you were there. The hype was real. So definitely not the same this time around. Feels like the fan base just in general is about as down in this football team as they've been in a very long time following a 3-win year. So hopefully this team gives us something to cheer about this year. Hopefully we get some meaningful games. Can we get out of September this year without an 0-3, 0-4 record? That'd be nice. So we'll see how things play out.
Yep. I mean, you nailed it. Just getting off to a good start and just giving us, something to look forward to with this team is going to be vital. And getting off to a good start requires some guys to emerge right away. So I thought a week into camp, it'd be a good time to take a little stock up, stock down on some Jets players. So I tipped you off that we were going to be doing this. So I know you put together some names, as did I. Let's start with some positive news. Players that have really improved their stock so far in camp. And when I was looking at this list, the first name that immediately stood out to me, and it's an obvious one, but I do think it matters, I think it's David Bailey. Because remember, there was such a big debate on whether or not the Jets should draft this player at number 2. I preferred Arvell Reese, but I certainly wasn't against David Bailey. My whole thing was, if you're drafting him because the logic is he could help you right away and try and save the coach's job, I don't like that logic. If you're drafting him because you believe he's the best player, then all right, just be right about it. That's all that anyone cares about at the end of the day. And I get it. It's training camp and it's not games and all that, but the fact that he's made plays, he's looked the part of a number 2 pick, that's encouraging because this is a franchise that famously drafted Vernon Golston in the top 10, and we know how that looked. So I think David Bailey, it's an obvious one, but it should still be said. David Bailey has really improved his stock so far a week into training camp.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He has been very noticeable from a pass rushing standpoint, which is what we all knew he brought to the table coming over from Texas Tech. And that was the big debate, right? Do you go with Arvell Reese, the more project type of player, developmental type of player, might not be able to make an impact right away in year 1? Or do you go with the more known commodity, the proven NFL pass rusher, most NFL ready pass rusher in the draft, in David Bailey? And I totally agree with you. If the logic behind it was, well, Glenn needs to save his job, they need to win games early and all that stuff, as opposed to the long-term viewpoint on it, then you don't go about the process in the draft that way. But they still end up with David Bailey, highest drafted defensive player in franchise history. And it's funny because getting selected at number 2 overall, all of the history that goes into that from a franchise standpoint, highest draft pick defensively in franchise history, kind of a quiet spring for David Bailey. And I know it's practices in May and June, and there's not a ton of stock that you want to put into those, but you didn't hear his name much, and you kind of went into training camp not really hearing much about him too, just on a national level. Not many people thinking, look at David Bailey as somebody to keep an eye on this summer, especially once preseason games get going. But to see him go out there and have a dominant practice on day 2 of training camp, 3 sacks, there's been some good plays too against the run. Certainly some things that he's got to clean up against the run. There was a few times where he got sucked in on some outside run plays. Those things have got to get cleaned up, but you've seen some good gap integrity, edge, holding the edge, all of those kind of nerdy words we talk about as football fans. You've seen some of that too from him this camp, but the pass rushing ability has been on full display. The athleticism, the quickness off the line, all of those things that you saw with him at Texas Tech. last season, going out there and leading the country in sacks you've seen so far, and you've seen it pick up as well with the pads coming on. You want to see that continue. But if David Bailey can go out there right away, make an impact for this team in week one and moving forward, that's huge, right? We talk about it so much, but just look at that Titans game in general. That's an offensive line that led the league in sacks given up last year. If you can go out there week one and get home to Cam Ward, that's a huge advantage in potentially winning that game. And it's going to start with a guy like David Bailey going out there and proving his worth as the number 2 overall pick. And it's good to see him put together some of these positive practices early on. And he's going up against 2 of some of the better players at their position in Olu and Armand Membu, which is the age-old iron sharpens iron, some of them say, right? Getting better from going up against each other. So really intrigued to see how he continues to play out here in camp. Joint practices next week against Tampa will be a lot of fun to see. And, of course, the preseason games coming up here as well in a little over a week.
Give me a player to you, Bubs, that has improved their stock. I went first with Bailey, so you now get your pick of a player.
I guess I'll stick on the defensive side of the football. I'll go A.Z. Thomas. You know, it's funny. 2 guys that I feel like have kind of gotten, I don't know if I want to say forgotten or kicked to the side, what phrase you really want to word there, but I think 2 guys that some Jet fans have lost track of a tad is A.Z. Thomas and Mason Taylor from a year ago. 2 top 100 picks, 2 guys that were taken in the second round. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Kenyon Sadiq draft pick at 16th overall for Mason Taylor. A lot of the focus was on Sadiq entering camp. And then when they went out and added Nahshon Wright coming off of a season where he had 5 interceptions, was on that Bears defense that led the league in turnovers. We know how much of an emphasis the Jets put on turnovers this year with the playmaking ability guys that they brought in. A.Z. Thomas and Mason Taylor, I think, have kind of flown into camp a bit of under the radar, especially A.Z. Thomas, somebody who's competing for that opposite boundary corner job from Brandon Stevens. And I think right now you've got to think that A.Z. Thomas is winning that job. Each practice you walk away with some really good coverage reps against Garrett. He's had some good reps against A.D. Mitchell as well. A few pass breakups and one-on-one drills. He's looked good. And I think the big difference between A.Z. Thomas and Nahshon Wright, and why I think A.Z. Thomas has a real chance to win out this job, is he's more of that prototypical lockdown corner, had an under 50% completion percentage last year when targeted. Quarterbacks only completed 48% of their passes. And it's also important to note he had the highest incompletion rate out of any rookie cornerback last year. And I think we forget a little bit about that because he had the shoulder injury to end the season. His season was cut short, only 12 games, 5 starts, had the shoulder surgery. So you went into this offseason and this training camp wanting to see how he bounces back from that and what he can do in year 2. But I think so far in camp, you've seen a lot of really good things from him. And if I had to guess, it felt like during the spring, at least everything you heard, Nahshon Wright was the leader for that CB2 job. It feels like through the first 5 practices, number 6 practice going on today as we speak, A.Z. Thomas has taken over that role a bit, a lot more run with the ones. So he's somebody that I look at as a draft pick last year who a lot of people saw potentially going in round 1. The only reason he didn't, if you remember, he had that bad 40-time athleticism, why it didn't test out very well, but was in the 80th percentile in terms of arm length, and the frame is there, the press man corner. So I look at A.Z. Thomas as somebody that if he can win that job, that's a really good sign, not only just for this year, but down the road being a future piece for this team, right? You sell off Sauce Gardner, so you've got a little bit of a new look secondary in terms of Michael Carter was gone at the deadline. Of course, Sauce as well. You bring in Nahshon Wright, Pons, A.Z. Thomas, a little bit of a makeover as you redo that room moving forward. I think A.Z. Thomas so far has been impressive, and I think it's a good thing if you're the Jets. And you look at Nahshon Wright, the turnovers are a good thing, but he gets burned a lot. There is a lot of boom-bust type of play from Nahshon Wright. I think A.Z. Thomas gives you a bit of a higher floor, if that makes sense at corner.
Absolutely. And if we do stock down, which we will, I would put Nahshon Wright in that, not because he's necessarily not playing well, just because here's a guy who led the NFL in interceptions. The Jets sign him and doesn't feel like he's going to start at this point. I'm going to combine this answer for my next stock up, Bubs. I'm going to say both kickers. They both have been good. Cade York has made a lot of kicks, as is Jason Sanders, who I still think is the favorite for that job because he has more of a track record. He just was injured last year, but he was a good kicker in the league for several seasons before his injury played season a year ago where he didn't kick at all. So I would say both kickers have, to this point, made us feel a little better about the situation. Now, the inner Jet fan, I think, in all of us is like, oh, no, what if they pick the wrong kicker and then the guy they pick stinks and the guy that they don't pick goes somewhere else and is great and then you can't bring him back and then you're facing another kicking crisis. But you rather this than the alternative. So for right now, a weekend, it's nice to feel somewhat good about the kicking situation because of all the moves Darren Muji made this offseason, and I basically understood and agreed with most of them. The only one I didn't like was letting Nick Folk walk. So at least to this point, both kickers have looked good in camp, and we'll see how the preseason shakes out.
Yeah, if there's a fan base that knows two things, what bad football looks like and bad kicking looks like, it's the New York Jet fan, because we have been through the ringer with these bad kickers. And unfortunately with kickers, you look at it like baseball. There are a lot of times like relievers, they change so much year over year and you truly never know what you're going to get. Zerline was automatic in 23. You follow that up in 24. He was obviously a disaster, costed the Jets a few games. Last year, the special teams won us 2 games. And you hope that continues this year with Banjo. But yeah, I think you look back at the offseason and the one question you would have is not going out there and bringing back Nick Folk. And it reminded me a bit of, if it turns out in the Jets' favor, the Thomas Morstead move last year, where you questioned it at the time, but they ended up going out and finding Austin McNamara, who was excellent, and you find your long-term solution at punter. You hope that's the case this year, where you move on from Nick Folk, that veteran who was really just perfect in 2025, has shown no signs of slowing down. And then you go out there, move on from him. You don't give him that second year that he gets in Atlanta, and you bring in Jason Sanders, Cade York. Of course, there's been a few other names in terms of what the kicker from Will Farron, I think it was the kicker from BYU, who was there for a bit during mini camp. They got rid of him. But Cade York's been here through it all. And I'm actually surprised how close it's been in terms of Cade York and Jason Sanders. I thought Sanders was going to run away with it, or they were both going to stink and they were going to bring somebody else in. But Cade York's kicking well. They're both kicking really well. They're both getting distance. Sanders hit from 60 plus the other day. They're both going 7 of 8, 8 of 8 in these practices. So the Chris Banjo kicking lab is off to a good start. I still think Sanders wins the job out, but anything can happen. We'll see what they look like in the preseason games. I think when you look at Jason Sanders and the track record he certainly has that over Cade York, in terms of, this was a guy who kicked very well in MetLife. We all know him from division rival, right? The Dolphins, kicked a lot against the Jets, had success against the Jets. So I look at Cade or Jason Sanders as somebody that probably wins this job. And if you can get back to 2024 form, this was a guy in 2024 that had a monster leg, 12 of 14 from 50 plus. So he has shown you he can kick from deep, and that's obviously key. So we'll see how it continues to play out, but it's been a pleasant surprise. I fully expected to enter camp with either one of them kicking really poorly, both kicking poorly, but it's been a fun competition to watch, and we'll see how it continues to progress over the next couple weeks. And then, of course, the preseason games, and ultimately once roster cutdowns come in later this month.
The Jake Asman Show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Check out PrizePicks right now. If you're a sports fan, they have something for everyone, especially if you're one of my listeners and you're gearing up for the upcoming Jets season. For player picks on PrizePicks, you just pick a player you like and you go more or less on a few of their stats. Check out some of the numbers they have for some of your favorite Jet players: Geno Smith, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Omar Cooper Jr., Kenyon Sadiq, and many more. PrizePicks should be your go-to, and check out their new offer right now. Play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. All you need to do is sign up and use that code HMA. That's PrizePicks code HMA. Download the app now or click the link in the description to download the PrizePicks app today. And Fat Bulldog has a super chat here. And thanks for signing up for the Patreon recently, Fat Bulldog. Appreciate you. He says, I know DT, that's Dylan Terraman, has a man crush on Darrell Jackson Jr. What's the scoop on Jackson? Can he be a rotational piece or a high-end backup? Would be great for us. So I read this super chat early because the next stock up I wanted to bring up to you, Bubs, is Darrell Jackson Jr. One negative of some of these injuries to a guy like T'Vondre Sweat is you're seeing other guys get a chance to play. And Darrell Jackson went from a guy who many thought he was going to be basically an inactive player most weeks, and he'd sit back and learn from David Onyemata and Harrison Phillips and T'Vondre Sweat, and then maybe he's a rotational piece in his second year. He went from that to, well, wait a second, he's getting reps with the starters, and apparently he's been impactful. So you talk about the very definition of a player who's improved his stock, to go from he's probably going to be inactive most of the year to he's getting reps with the starters. That's a guy who has certainly improved his stock.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, I think, the key to all of this is, unfortunately, Tavondre Sweat not out there with the hamstring. Little concerned about that from a big guy standpoint. You want him conditioned, ready to go, getting all the reps as possible. Bigger players in general, you always fear the injuries and keeping their body healthy. But the positive to that, or the silver lining to that, is more reps for a guy like Darrell Jackson Jr., of course, the 4th-round pick. And it's a good sign for a day 3 pick to be out there this early in camp running with the first team and having success. And I think that's the key. This isn't like he's having success against the 2nd, 3rd team guys that are going to be cut in a few weeks. He's having success against this starting Jets offensive line, getting a lot more reps, getting a lot more opportunities, and he's showcasing themselves. And Jackson, similar to Sweat, just a massive human being, the age-old you can't teach size, right? 6'5", 337 pounds. I think also you look at this defensive line and edge rush room as well. Getting coached up by Carl Dunbar is just a massive, massive positive in all of this. Say what you want about the coaching staff, the concerns that we might have about this coaching staff. I think one coach that we can all get behind is Carl Dunbar, especially after what Eric Washington brought to the table as a defensive line coach, which was clearly a disaster. You heard a lot of that players were turning his back on him. Same thing with Steve Wilkes, not a lot to like there. So Carl Dunbar, leader in that room, grown up in that room with a track record of success. And it's good to see Darrell Jackson Jr. having a good camp so far. And who knows, maybe this is, like you said, a guy that was probably going to be just that depth, inactive on game day, injury pops up, then he plays a rotational role in his rookie year, potentially down the road developing into, a nice 2nd or 3rd, 4th defensive tackle for this team. But if he can go out there and continue to prove this, it just makes the Jets even more deeper. And I think it's got to make you even more intrigued about the interior of this defensive line between what they have in Sweat on Yamada, Harrison Phillips, Briggs. You add on Darrell Jackson Jr. showcasing himself a bit in a bit of a surprise way as a 4th-round pick. I think that only makes you deeper for a room that was pathetic last year and has been pathetic really the last 2 to 3 years when it comes to defending the run. I think it's another good tool that the Jets have in their toolbox when it comes to this defensive tackle group. So definitely a positive sign so far.
Deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.